Want to know how to blow up a family without raising your voice? Just be the granddaughter who showed up, stayed late, helped out, paid the bills, and then got everything grandma left. You don't have to start a war. Just inherit what they ignored. I never really lived at home. Technically, sure, my mom had a place, a husband, 2 other kids. But if you asked me where I felt like I existed, I'd say, my grandma's kitchen. That tiny beige apartment with the loose cupboard handle and the smell of chamomile that never left the curtains. I used to go there, just for the weekend, and somehow stay for weeks. No one complained. No one asked. My mom used to say, "You love playing the victim." But I didn't feel like a victim at grandma's. I felt like someone who was allowed to sit still. She wasn't loud, or sweet, or one of those Hallmark grandmas. She was quiet, matter of fact. She kept old receipts in a cookie tin and thought smartphones were obnoxious. But she'd always remember to buy my favorite cereal, even when I stopped eating breakfast. When I was 12, I had my first panic attack in her living room. She didn't freak out. Just handed me a paper bag and said, "Breathe into this. You're not dying. It just feels like it." I still use that line on myself sometimes. My mom had this way of making me feel like an inconvenience in my own life. Her new husband wasn't cruel, just indifferent in that boring, steady way that still leaves bruises. He once forgot my name at a parent-teacher night. Grandma never did. She called me her girl. Not in a clingy way, just like a fact. Like gravity. I used to help her with errands, doctor's appointments, groceries, that dusty drawer where she kept warranties for appliances she didn't own anymore. She'd say, "I don't want to be a burden," and I'd always tell her she wasn't. Because she wasn't. I used to get mad when she said that, like she couldn't see how much I needed her. When I turned 21, I stayed with her for a whole summer. I told my mom it was because I needed quiet to study, but really I just needed to be where someone asked how my day was, and listened. That was the last time we had real time together. She looked smaller than before. Her hands shook more. I started going with her to the doctor. Paid a few bills. Got her into a better pharmacy plan. She said, "I don't have much to leave you, you know." I said I didn't care. And I didn't. I still don't. She looked at me one day while we were drinking instant coffee at that chipped little table and said, "I know I'm not gonna be around forever. But you're my person. I need you to know that." I just nodded. I didn't think it meant anything legal. I didn't know what it would cost me. I didn't know what would come after. She passed on a Thursday. I was at work when the nurse called. No long speech. Just, "She's gone." I left early, told my manager I'd be out for a while, and went straight to the apartment. It was still warm inside. Her glasses were on the nightstand. Half a cup of tea, cold, on the windowsill. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, holding the doorknob like it could tell me what to do. The next few days blurred, paperwork, funeral home appointments, scanning ID cards, calling the 2 friends she still had. No one else stepped in. My mom texted me, "Keep me posted." That was it. I paid for the cremation. She didn't want a casket. Said once, "I'm not spending $5,000 to rot in a box." I respected that. We kept it small. Quiet. A few folding chairs, me reading a poem I found in her nightstand. After, I sat on the curb alone. My mom showed up late. Wearing sunglasses, sipping from a Starbucks cup like she was waiting for a soccer game to start. Behind her came the rest of them. My Aunt Cheryl, who hadn't spoken to Grandma in 4 years. My Uncle Dennis, who used to call her crazy every Thanksgiving. Cousins I hadn't seen since high school graduation. All hugs and, "You poor thing." It felt like a wake for someone they didn't actually know. That night, back at the apartment, I started getting texts. "What do you want to do about her place? Are you planning to clean it out this weekend? Maybe we should talk about selling it, split it fairly." I didn't answer. I sat on the floor, in the dark, and pulled the folder out from her desk. The one with my name on it. Inside, a notarized will. Dated a year ago. Everything left to me. The apartment. The savings account. Even the dog she had to rehome. I hadn't known. Not really. But reading it, I wasn't surprised. I didn't feel greedy. I felt seen. Like she left me a seat at the table after everyone else made it clear there wasn't one. I told my mom. Send a scan of the document. Her response, we'll see about that. Then came the calls. The first call was polite. We just want to talk this through, my mom said. It doesn't have to get messy. I said there's nothing to talk about. She paused, then said, Lauren, this isn't what your grandmother would have wanted, you against the family. I didn't reply. Because I knew exactly what my grandmother wanted. She put it in writing. The second call was colder. You think this is fair? She snapped. You think you earned it just because you played nurse? And then came the texts. From my aunt. From a cousin I barely knew. Pretty selfish. Hope you enjoy the spoils. You manipulated a dying woman. I stopped reading after a while. Blocked the numbers. But they still found ways. Fake Facebook profiles, emails, a handwritten note shoved into the doorframe one morning, you'll regret this. I didn't answer any of it. I just kept coming back to that line in the will, for everything she did when no one else did anything. Still, I started to doubt. I wasn't used to standing my ground. I was used to folding. Being the one who said sorry first. I started dreaming about the hallway in Grandma's apartment, the one with the squeaky floorboard. I'd wake up hearing it, swearing someone was walking toward me in the dark. One night, I sat on the kitchen floor with her old cardigan in my hands and whispered, you really meant this, right? You weren't just trying to fix something too late. I waited for a sign. Got silence. That week, a formal letter arrived. They were contesting the will. Of course they were. They didn't know her favorite cereal, but they wanted her walls. I found a lawyer. One who didn't charge for the first consult. He looked over the paperwork and said, they don't have a case. But they'll make it ugly. He was right. The hearing was short, but the waiting wasn't. I sat outside that courtroom in a plastic chair, hands shaking, her photo in my jacket pocket. No one sat with me. No one showed up for them either. They sent a lawyer, not their faces. In the end, the judge said the will was valid. Just like that. Legal clarity. Emotional wreckage. I went home and sat on the stairs. The hallway was quiet. But I kept thinking I'd hear that floorboard. Like she was still there. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I was the last one left after a storm, standing in a house that didn't know what to do without her breath in it. The silence after the storm is different. It's not peaceful. It's hollow. The kind of quiet that presses in, like the air's waiting for something to break. After the court hearing, nobody called. Nobody knocked. For the first time in years, my phone stayed still. I stopped checking it. I went room to room, opening windows that hadn't been touched in months. The apartment smelled like dust and lavender and something else, something that only lives in places where love once sat still. I found her sweater draped over the back of the kitchen chair. I didn't move it. Couldn't. I ate cereal for dinner and sat on the floor because the couch still felt too much like her spot. One night I went through the bottom drawer of her dresser and found a box I'd never seen. Inside, a photo of me at 13, holding a science fair ribbon. A receipt from a bakery I used to work at. And a letter. Dated last year. In her shaky script, if they fight you, it's because they don't understand what it means to stay. You stayed. That's all that matters. This is your home now. Even when I'm not in it. I cried like I hadn't let myself since the nurse called. Not loud. Not messy. Just tears that kept falling while I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, I miss you. I miss you so much. Weeks passed. The apartment started to feel like mine. Not all at once, more like in layers. I got new curtains. Kept her mugs. Bought a soft rug for the living room where the linoleum always felt cold. One day I wrote about it. Just a blog post. Raw and honest. No names. No drama. Just, sometimes, they only remember you exist when something dies. I didn't expect anyone to read it. But people did. Messages started coming in, strangers saying, "Same here. You wrote my life. Thank you." I started writing more. I didn't have a plan. Just stories. Memories. Grief that had nowhere else to go. And slowly, this apartment, the one they all wanted to divide, became the one place I didn't have to. No one knocks now. And I don't expect them to. I make tea in her kettle. I fold laundry on her couch. I don't call it my inheritance. I call it what's left when love outlasts the noise. And I stay. I've lived in this apartment my whole life. Same rust-stained sink, same crooked blinds, same damn floorboard in the hallway that creaks no matter how light you step. It's not fancy. It never was. But it was home, or the closest thing to it. My parents weren't married. My dad moved in when they were both 21, left when I was 7, and never looked back. No custody fight, no dramatic exit. Just a note on the fridge that said, "I need to do what's right for everyone." I was in the next room eating cereal when my mom found it. She stood there holding the paper like it had slapped her. Then she tore it in half and said, "Okay. We'll be fine." And somehow, we were. She worked herself raw. Early mornings at the bakery, late nights cleaning offices. She smelled like bleach and powdered sugar. I used to wake up at 3 a.m. and hear her feet dragging in the hallway. She'd kiss my forehead even when I pretended to be asleep. When something broke, she'd say, "We'll fix it this weekend." When rent went up, she'd just say, "We'll make it work." And we did. Together. I got my first job at 14 sweeping hair at a barbershop. Gave her every paycheck. She always said she didn't need it, but she never gave it back. I painted these walls when I was 16. Fixed the door frame myself when it started to rot. Took over grocery runs, the bills, anything I could. She never asked. I just did it. Because that's what you do when the person who stays gives you everything they have. She got sick when I was 20. Fast. Quiet. Stage 4 by the time we found it. I dropped out of school. Didn't even think twice. She said, "Mike, you can't." I said, "Mom, I already did." I held her hand in hospice. She died on a Tuesday. Just me in the room. After the funeral, there wasn't much. No savings. No insurance. Just this apartment, full of old furniture and the hum of things that once had her hands on them. No one came asking what I'd do. I stayed. I worked. I patched the roof with my own 2 hands. The neighbors started asking me to fix things for them. I never said no. Eventually, I had a list. A calendar. A business. But this place, this was still home. Not because of what it looked like. Because of who I became inside it. And for years, no one knocked on my door unless something needed repairing. Until one day someone did. And I opened it, and saw the face I hadn't seen in 20 years. He showed up on a Thursday. No call, no warning, just a knock on the door I almost didn't answer. When I opened it, he was standing there like nothing had happened. Like it hadn't been 20 years since he left. Like he hadn't skipped every birthday, every scraped knee, every moment when I needed someone to just show up. Next to him stood a woman I'd never seen, and a little boy, maybe 6 or 7, clinging to her hand. The woman gave me this awkward smile. The kid looked like he didn't want to be there. My father looked straight past me, into the apartment, and said, "You've kept it nice." I didn't say anything. I didn't move. Then he cleared his throat and added, "We should talk about the apartment." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. That fake calm voice people use when they're about to take something from you. I said, "What about it?" He looked surprised I wasn't just going to let him in. "Well," he said, "you know you're on the deed. I added you when you were born. You and me, joint ownership. I thought it would help you one day." I laughed. Out loud. Couldn't help it. "So generous," I said. "Too bad you forgot to help with anything else." He didn't flinch. Just said, "We need to sell. My family and I, we need a fresh start. I figured we could split it fair. 50-50. I felt like the ground moved under me. Not from shock. From something colder. I'd lived here my whole life. I'd paid every bill, every repair. My mom had covered the mortgage alone until she couldn't anymore. I buried her from this apartment. Painted the walls myself. Rewired the outlets when the whole place started sparking. But sure, 50-50. You've got paperwork, I said. But you don't have a leg to stand on. He smiled like that didn't bother him. We'll see what the court says. Then they left. Just like that. And I stood in the doorway wondering how someone could disappear for 2 decades and come back only to take. Not to ask how I was. Not to say sorry. Just to see if I'd fold. I didn't sleep much after that. I kept hearing the lock click in my head, over and over, like maybe he'd come back with movers and muscle. But he didn't. He came with paperwork. A formal notice. Filed through the county court. Request to sell the property and split proceeds. I brought it to a legal aid clinic downtown. The woman who looked over it raised her eyebrows and said, "Well, he's not wrong. Technically. My name and his were both on the deed. He'd added me as co-owner when I was a baby, probably for the tax break or to feel like a good dad. Never changed it. Never used it. Until now. So that's it?" I asked. He can just come back and sell the only place I've ever had? She shook her head. Not exactly. You've got history here. You've paid. You've maintained it. There's room to argue. And more importantly, she pulled out another form. If he's your biological father, and he never paid child support, you may be able to file a counterclaim. I didn't even know that was possible. But apparently, the state doesn't love deadbeat parents showing up 20 years later acting like landlords. We dug up everything, rent payments, utility bills in my name, old receipts for plumbing repairs, a sworn statement from the neighbor upstairs who watched me patch the roof after a storm. I found my mom's old folder with documents. Turns out she'd saved every check stub, every note he ever wrote her before he left. One of them literally said, "You'll be better off without me." We submitted everything. It went to court. He showed up in a suit that didn't quite fit. Brought his new partner. She looked at me like I was the villain. He said, "I'm just trying to do what's fair." My lawyer said, "Then maybe start by paying for the past." The judge reviewed the files. The room was quiet, except for my heartbeat. Then he spoke, "This property will be sold and proceeds split. But the father is ordered to pay child support retroactively, with interest, for every month between the date of separation and the plaintiff's 18th birthday." It was quiet again. I didn't move. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something. His face cracked, just for a second. That was it. He stood. Left the room without looking at me. And all I could think was, "You didn't lose the apartment today. You lost the right to say you were ever here." The apartment sold 3 months later. I signed the papers with a pen that shook in my hand, like even my body didn't want to let go. The place wasn't glamorous, it never had been. But it held everything that built me. The scuff on the kitchen floor from where I used to spin in socks. The drawer that stuck halfway because my mom never let anyone force it. The closet where I hid when I was 8 and thought the world might actually fall apart. I walked through one last time before I turned in the keys. Ran my fingers along the windowsill she used to keep her tiny plants on. touched the wall where her shadow always fell when she read at night. I stood in the doorway and whispered, "Thank you," even though I didn't know who I was talking to, her, the walls, or the version of myself who grew up here quietly learning how to survive. I didn't cry. Not until I got to the elevator. Then it came all at once. The grief. The relief. The end of something only I knew how to carry. I used my share of the sale, along with the full amount the court forced him to pay, to buy a small place across town. A one-bedroom with creaky floors and bad paint, but the kind of silence I could live inside without feeling like I was trespassing. I didn't furnish it all at once. I brought things slowly. My mom's favorite chair. Her faded photo from the beach. The tea mug with the chip she refused to throw away. I didn't hang pictures right away. I waited until the space started to feel like it knew me. I slept on the floor the first week. Just a mattress and a blanket, and the sense that for the first time in my life, no one could take this from me. Not legally. Not emotionally. People still ask if I talk to him. I don't. I don't block his number. I just don't answer. You don't get to come back after decades and ask for respect from the person you made a stranger. He had a son. He chose not to keep him. Now he has another. I hope he does better. I really do. But I'm not part of that story. Sometimes I wonder what he tells people. That I was difficult. That I didn't want to work things out. That I'm selfish for taking what he thinks was his. I wonder if his new kid knows I exist. If he ever says my name. But then I stop wondering. Because none of that lives here. Not in these walls. I sit at my little kitchen table with the sun coming in just right, make tea in her old kettle, and know that I've done something he never could. I stayed. I paid. I grew. And I chose to heal, not for him, but in spite of him. One night, while unpacking old boxes, I found a note folded into a torn envelope. I hadn't seen it in years. My mom's handwriting, rushed and slanted like always. It said, "If the world gets heavy, sit still. It won't crush you if you stop trying to outrun it. You were never the weight. You were the reason I carried it." I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the wet edge soak into my thumb. That night I finally hung the last picture. Her, in the kitchen, smiling at something off camera. I lit a candle. Sat still. And whispered, "I'm here, Ma. You can rest now." And for the first time in a long, long time, I did too. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.